Okay, there's one topic that I haven't gotten to discuss this week. It has been a little busy for me. I was focusing a lot on the Venezuela issue. I think the Venezuela issue and the issue of Latin America as a whole is more important for me personally than a lot of the stuff that is really popular on YouTube, which, don't no disrespect for that, but that's just the way I think. But what's going on right now is this Sarah Jeong issue. It kind of shows really where the standards of journalism have sunk. Okay? Because the fact of the matter is that when you become a journalist for, a highly thought of publication like the New York Times used to be, it's usually kind of, just to show a mark of prestige. It should be a mark of prestige for both the writer and the publication, but that's just not the case anymore. And in fact, if you look at the New York Times' own attitude towards race and its attitude towards all of those issues of social division based on race, you can see that they've slid all the way into the territory of being just like any other left-wing newspaper, just like Slate, just like Salon, just like any other one of them. There's virtually no difference in terms of the content. So I will say that people should know that in terms of race identity, I'm probably one of the people that least considers it an important issue. The reason is because I think that people, conflicts arise, whatever the factor is. So some people, yes, they're absolutely racist, and some people are just hateful for whatever reason that they want. And that's something I think that we just have to accept as an element of human nature. There's definitely this issue where people will find a reason to hate somebody even if there is no reason. And race is one of those issues. I'm somebody, for example, there's this big movement among people who are on the alt-right or whatever, that they're against race mixing. They want to preserve the white race. I say, those people that are big identitarians, that are against interracial marriage, I don't think that you have any moral standing to tell anybody else who to knock up. Okay? How about you mind your own fucking business? That's my attitude towards that. It has nothing to do with tolerance or intolerance. It has to do with telling other people what to do with their lives. Okay, I'm not going to say I'm explicitly for interracial marriage or interracial relationships, because I personally don't care. Okay, I've seen all types of relationships fail, and I've seen all types of ones that you didn't think would succeed did succeed. I met Len McCarthy. I met a data man. I don't think this is going to be a very long one, because I'm actually expecting somebody. I'm just having a house guest over the weekend staying here from out of town, so I'm probably not going to be video blogging while they're here. Obviously not on a Friday evening, which I never do anyway. So in any case, the Columbia Journalism Review wrote this piece saying Sarah Jeong, the New York Times, and the Gamergate School of Journalism. And it's written by this guy, David Uberti. And basically it's the same type of just, prestige journalism that these people practice. We have the watermark at the top, and everybody who doesn't respect our moral judgment is an alt-righter. That's basically the way they behave. So they mimic in their behavior and in their rhetoric the actual behavior of the alt-right. On Thursday, just a day after the New York Times announced Sarah Jeong is the new member of its editorial board, she also joined the small but growing club of journalists who have been labeled as the real racists in italics in certain corners of the internet. Right-wing media outlets dredged up a series of inflammatory tweets Jeong sent between 2013 to 2015, in which she appeared to demonize white people. Creatures of the pro-Trump fever swamps take actor James Woods, who's amassed 1.64 million Twitter followers, are a bruising defender of the president, as a bruising defender of the president, employed it in their anti-media crusade. Now, I want to say this. Calling James Wood a creature of the pro-Trump fever swamp is, you know, and they're calling that to James Woods. Well, what would you call John Legend then? Would he be, you know, is his main claim to fame constantly tweeting about Donald Trump now? You know, derogatorily, absolutely. But they don't lead it by saying that he's a creature of the anti-Trump fever swamp. So you can already see here that they're not applying the same standards to to people on either side of this issue. And in fact, what does Trump have to do with this? You know, the fact is that James Woods is a Trump supporter, and he happens to have condemned this issue with Sarah Jeong. Does he mention Trump in his tweet? I don't see it. I don't see any mention of Donald Trump here. Actually, yeah, this was, you know what? I'm wrong. She did say, I mean, I hope he gets defeated and fuck white women, LOL. So she said something that's derogatory towards an entire class and gender of people. And they're focusing on James Woods, you know, an actor who's been in a number of pretty good films. Wasn't he in Jaws? Was that James Woods? That might have been Roy Scheider. Maybe it was both of them. To be honest with you, I don't know if James Woods is, I mean, he's been in a few good films, but I don't think that that's really the point. Here's another one. Dumbass fucking white people marking up the internet with their opinions like dogs pissing on fire hydrants. And he says, so the New York Times welcomes its newest member to the editorial board. So I think personally that this isn't really an issue of Donald Trump necessarily. It happens to be that Donald Trump was mentioned in passing in one of her tweets. But there's no reason to bring up James Woods' opinion on Donald Trump in reference to this. By the way, I mean, her tweet is in and of itself. Is that an objective, reasoned view of Donald Trump? No, it's a very opinionated and flagrantly biased opinion of Donald Trump. She says, are white people genetically predisposed to burn faster in the sun, thus logically being only fit to live underground like groveling goblins? Cancel white people. That's what she said. So this has been all over the internet for over a day. It says such culture war dust-ups are a fixture of digital life. But in the Trump era, they've jumped from the comment sections and Reddit threads to the highest levels of national politics and media, forcing the professional press to belatedly grapple with how to respond. The Times and The Verge both put out statements Thursday following the uproar among conservatives over Jeong's tweets. Their divergent responses provided a clear snapshot of arguably the largest fault line within journalism today. The one between journalists who have grown up on the internet and the media organizations who haven't. This split can make itself visible at times through political ideology and, in turn, opposing views on the objectivity and detachment. But at its core, it's generational, and it divides journalists on issues ranging from how to respond to harassment campaigns to the way to frame coverage of Donald Trump. Hold on a second. I think I have. Just have to check this. So they're really, you know, everything is anchored around Donald Trump here in their mind. So in their mind, to concede that she has this unhinged view of the world and that she just spouts off at the mouth, that would be conceding ground to the Donald Trump group. And that in their minds would be a concession. And this is a person from the Columbia School of Journalism Review. Jeong, for her part, which, by the way, is the most, you know, it's the most prestigious school of journalism for those of you that care about that. Jeong, for her part, offered contrition in a statement on Thursday. Female journalists are far more likely to be harassed than their male colleagues. And the 30-year-old Asian American described her past tweets as counter-trolling in response to racist and sexist abuse she received while covering tech and digital culture. The Times itself echoed that sentiment in its own statement later, soon after. But the fact is that if you go and look at those tweets themselves, okay, I don't even know if they I think those tweets have been deleted, by the way. So, but if you go and look at them, they weren't actually in response to them. Okay? They were actually just, a lot of them were actually the root tweet, the initial tweet. I don't know what you call it. I'm not a big Twitter buff. I do have an account. But the fact is that most of those tweets had nothing to do with responding to trolls or anything or racism. They were just her saying, whatever it is, like this, the one about burn faster and stuff like that. So this is this is basically them hiring a person who is now lying about what she actually did with those tweets. What was the motivation behind them? Yeah, that's cool. Memes of destruction. I burned first exposure to a rosy lobster like red. Yeah, Lennon McCarthy, I also heard about that racism in Korean culture from Tim Pool, who is half Korean. I watch his channel every day. Jeong's tweets were bad, in short, and the writer herself acknowledged how hurtful these posts are out of context. They were not out of context. They were tweets that she put out as her, as her expression of whatever she felt at the time. But they weren't bad enough for the Times to unhire her, leaving many on the right interpreting it as tacit approval of her supposed views. Andrew Sullivan seized the New York Magazine that the idea Jeong was merely mimicking her harassers is the purest of bullshit. Well, it's true. Fox News' Tucker Carlson, who's carved out a large niche as the voice of aggrieved white men, took the occasion to characteristically fillet all of mainstream media. Well, this is a person who's writing on behalf of Columbia School of Journalism, using weasel words and not weasel words. He's actually attacking Carlson, and using inserting his own opinion into the piece in order to degrade his credibility. That's not what you do if you're analyzing media. If you're blatantly coming out on one side, then the Columbia School of Journalism is basically churning out, liberal/left journalism. That's the only way to look at it. If that's the way that they define it, if that's how their writers define it, it's ridiculous. The notion that a few tweets from one young writer is evidence of an emerging front in institutional racism is proof enough that nothing can satisfy such arguments. It's bad faith, as many digital journalists have come to call these criticisms, and it willfully ignores historical nuance and context. Well, what is the historical nuance and context? He doesn't say here. The Verge, meanwhile, put a far more muscular response on Jeong's behalf. A note from the editorial leadership of the Vox-owned site targeted her critics rather than engaging with them. Online trolls and harassers want us, the Times, and other newsrooms to waste our time by debating their malicious agenda. They take tweets and other statements out of context because they want to disrupt us and harm individual reporters. The strategy is to divide and conquer by forcing newsrooms to disavow their colleagues one at a time. This is not a good faith conversation, it's intimidation. So we're not going to fall for these disingenuous tactics, and it's time other newsrooms learn to spot these hateful campaigns for what they are. Attempts to discredit and undo the vital work of journalists who report on the most toxic communities on the internet. This may appear hypocritical from the outside looking in. The mean tweets are okay this time because they come from someone on our team, but the reality is this aggressive stance is born from years under fire from critics who give journalists work the least generous interpretation possible in order to further their own interests. Does Fox News and the pro-Trump internet really want the New York Times to improve its internal culture and journalistic ethics? Or is painting, quote, the media as enemy of the people central to their business model and political mission? So I'll say this. It wouldn't be that way. It wouldn't be that Fox News would be pressuring the New York Times if the New York Times didn't claim that it was the paper of record. And the paper of record, if it claims that title, and then it practices opinionated journalism with a lot of skew and a lot of bias and a lack of basic consistency and ethics, then yes, it's absolutely right. Even for Fox News, which I don't watch, and I don't really like Fox News, to be honest with you, it is right for them to, because Fox News does not make, a lot of their people are out and out conservatives. And yet there's other people on Fox News like Shepard Smith who are hardcore anti-Trump people. And by hardcore, I mean they're truly opponents of Donald Trump. They're not like wishy-washy about it. Answering such questions requires value judgments about motive, which the Times and many other legacy outlets tend to avoid on issues ranging from Trump's lies to criticism of their respective publications. The Verge pointed to its own experience on this front in its statement, comparing the way Jeong's tweets were whipped into national news with Gamergate. So I want to say this. The Gamergate comparison is something that they will always go to after there were people who decided, these so-called journalists, of course, Anita Sarkeesian is the most famous of them, and then there's all these people from Kotaku, decided to proactively attack their own audience and characterize them as racist people. So then they created this monster out of the very community that sustained them. And I'm not a gamer. I don't really play video games almost ever. I have nothing against them. It's just I don't really find the motivation to do it. But in any case, they created that problem for themselves, and then they called it a toxic culture. Well, they created the toxic culture by attacking a sector of people that buy video games, and people buy video games of all different classes and nationalities. So it was really them doing it to themselves. The rapper says, "Hey, Bold, some of these writers at the New York Times, The Root, and others don't care about their biases and racism." I'm not sure what you mean by that. Today, here in Chicago, there was a pro-Trump shirt printed, and the SJWs got mad over that. Yeah, it sounds... I'm a little surprised that happens in Chicago, but maybe I'm, missing something. Lennon McCarthy says The Root is the Black Daily Stormer, according to the hard bastard. I think it's almost... I wouldn't say it's that bad, but it's getting there. And you know what? It would only be a slight exaggeration. It would only be a slight one. It's not far off. I don't think I'd agree totally, but it's not like he's really going over the top by saying that. Whether the Times and other... Okay, so the 2014 harassment campaign, masked as media critique, was a formative episode for many digital outlets and reporters, as critics weaponized media norms of civility and balance against journalism itself. Writers who spoke out about gaming's overwhelming whiteness or masculinity, and who often happen to be women or people of color, were met with hard-edged grievance politics from critics who were overwhelmingly white and male. Their cries about ethics in gaming journalism largely amounted to concern trolling aimed to get the media to do as they wished. You may recognize such tactics by Trump and some of his supporters online today. So this is dragging people like James Woods, who's not a gamer, who was not involved in Gamergate, and the Donald Trump people together. It's just character assassination. And the fact is that you have to take this into account, okay? If you are reporting as a journalist and then you're responding to people in the same manner that they talk to you, then you've made the leap from journalist to pundit and opinion person. You're no longer qualified to report the news in a balanced manner because you've become part of the story. This isn't a story where somebody is challenging some dictatorship or some godforsaken regime like in Haiti or something back in the 80s. These are people that are attacking just gamers or something. So they're portraying this as basically a noble crusade, and yes, I said crusade, against evil, bigoted gamers and Trump supporters. And it has nothing to do with that. This woman put out tweets that were defamatory towards an entire class of people. She didn't say against white gamers, and she didn't say against white Trump supporters. Whether the Times and other legacy outlets can employ some of the lessons of Gamergate without drastically reorienting their values, staying neutral without validating bad faith arguments remains an open question. The current political environment would seem to make it all but impossible for outlets that prize the appearance of impartiality. For now, though, young journalists like Jeong, who have long been told to be bold and edgy to build a brand, develop a voice, and explore their personal identities for $150 a pop, are exposed. Well, I wanted to say this. There used to be a huge difference between the style of journalism employed by the New York Times and the style of journalism employed by Vox. One of them was a little more about reporting on the news, and the other one was about, being bold and having an opinion. Sorry, I'm expecting a message here. We might have to cut it short, but I think I still have a little time. And instead of both of them just getting better at what they do, you have Vox just getting increasingly shrill. Vox and The Verge, because The Verge is part of Vox. I didn't even know that until now. They just get more and more slanted and committed to their cause, while the New York Times kind of trails behind it and follows it that way. It's basically like the Times is being anchored by Vox in terms of the direction that it's going. For now, though, young journalists like Jeong, who have long been told to be bold and edgy to build a brand, develop a voice, and explore their personal identities for $150 a pop, are exposed. Well, that's the point of Twitter. You say what you think. That's one of the reasons I'm not becoming a journalist. That's one of the reasons I don't tell people where I work or what I do. As longtime gawker blogger, excuse me, jeez, Alex Perrine pointed out Thursday, the implicit agreement by such kid writers was that the web would feed us in return for a new digitally native style of journalism, but the digital media industry has also proven unable to sustain itself, and as political enemies close in, it turns out that these journalists might be the ones who get eaten. So this is this complete nonsense. It says, editor's note, James Bennett, editorial page editor of the New York Times, is a member of Columbia Journalism Review's Board of Overseers. So this has to be, just a display of the stupidity of journalism today. That these people are, let's look at this guy's profile. I don't know anything about him at the moment. What's the point of women's publications, podcasts, the journalist and the arms dealer, drive-by journalism in Trumplandia, pro-Trump media claim victory after Comey testimony, the digital advertising doomsday clock, that's an interesting one. Help us track job losses in local newsrooms. My media serves me well. Yours is smut. Okay? This guy is just basically attacking Sean Hannity here. This is not actual academia and journalism. It's just biased journalism, just like you find everywhere else. So why is the Columbia Journalism Review employing this type of crap? Well, I'll tell you why. It is because, and this was the whole point of this whole video, the New York Times and its quote-unquote journalists and editors, they hold Major League Baseball pitchers and their fans to a higher standard than themselves and their staff. It says, this is from July 26, 2018, by Michael Powell. It says, we live in an age of unbridled white-id. Many days it is anything goes, baby, from the White House to the baseball stands. Objecting often draws a scornful wave of the hand and a lecture on political correctness. The latest eruption comes courtesy of Josh Hader, a 24-year-old white relief pitcher with a smoking fastball and a Twitter account filled with hideous thoughts typed when he was 17 and 18. A Hader sampler, white power, LOL, with an emoji of a clenched fist, KKK, and, quote, I hate gay people. He also used the vilest of words for black people. Well, he was much younger when he did this than Sarah Jeong was, and he wasn't working for the Milwaukee Brewers when he did it. He was again in the military. He was just he was in high school. This had nothing to do with his career. And this was discovered because he was appearing in the All-Star game. Point of information. Okay, this all came to light as Hader pitched in the All-Star game last week. After the game, he mumbled something about being influenced by rap lyrics. Then he abandoned that tack and began apologizing profusely. I was 17 years old, and as a child, I was immature, he said, and obviously I said some things that were inexcusable. Point of information, a 17-year-old can strive or serve in the military and is a year away from voting. That does not describe a child. I'm not unforgiving of youthful stupidity, although it would have been swell if reporters had asked obvious questions. How was it that you attended an integrated high school in exurban Maryland and yet posted racist and homophobic comments? From what sewer line did those sentiments bubble up? So they're going after a person 5 years later, or 6 years later, 6 or 7 years later, for tweets that he made in high school. And he's a Major League Baseball pitcher. He has nothing to do with politics. Josh Hader, who plays for the Brewers, who I don't like the Brewers because I'm a Cubs fan. So they're going after him, even though he was 17 years old when he did it, as opposed to a 20-something journalist, quote unquote, who had by the way, Sarah Jeong also had a Harvard Law degree. So she has a Harvard Law degree, and she's working for Vox. And she is an opinion maker. She is an opinion journalist. And that they don't hold her to any standard because they say Gamergate is the problem. Does that sound like unbiased journalism to you? That they behave this way? The more breathtaking moment, however, came nights later when Hader walked the mound in Milwaukee in his first appearance since the All-Star break. Thousands of fans, nearly all of them white, rose and gave him a standing ovation. Who knows precisely what was on the mind of each fan who stood? Intelligence often fails to march in step with fandom. Hometown players, including Milwaukee's Brian Braun, are applauded after they lie about steroid use and, in Braun's case, try to ruin the life of a drug tester. Not related to this at all. Not related at all. This, however, is a white behavioral moment worth exploring, and I type these words as a lifelong member of that race. Well, you own it because I don't have to claim it. I'm half Middle Eastern, so I don't care either way whether this guy's white or not. Let's pose a counterfactual. Josh Hader is black, and an excavation of his Twitter account reveals that he calls whites crackers, wrote of his hatred for them, and endorsed an organization that engaged in genocidal violence against whites. One of his tweets included a picture of a clenched black fist. That black picture had also expressed hatred for gays and made graphic misogynist statements. So that is what happened, except it didn't happen in baseball. It happened with the journalist. Okay, and these people that wanted basically to put him in sensitivity training. I mean, we're not going to read the whole thing because I don't have time today. They wanted to put this guy in sensitivity training for something he said as a 17-year-old high school student, but they claimed that Sarah Jeong is the real victim today because of Gamergate, which doesn't have anything to do with it. Why do you have Crispin Glover, Jason Biggs hair? Yeah, I really do need a haircut. Good looking up. So that's about it for me. And yeah, Arjun, you're going to have to pay for that last comment. Don't even joke about that. That's about it for today. Again, the New York Times posted an article by Michael Powell. Let's look who Michael Powell is, okay? So this is a guy he's the New York Times Sports of the Times columnist, former New York City cabbie, tenant organizer, and doorman, grew up I don't know what UWS is, lives in Brooklyn. This is the guy, and yet he thinks that, this is a guy who thinks that a Major League Baseball pitcher has a higher standard of personal conduct to follow than a person who's going to be on the editorial board of his newspaper. Okay, has he said anything about this? I don't see anything. Let me see here. Here, I'm writing an investigative series on a new wave of covert tactics targeting Israel's critics. Here's the first installment. So that's a retweet. I might check that out. It sounds interesting. And then more tweets about Trump. Anything about this? I don't see anything yet. American conservative Urban Meyer tweeting about the intelligence community in Russia. So I don't see anything about Sarah Jeong. So this guy had this long diatribe about Josh Hader, just a pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers, but nothing to say about somebody who has an even worse record, who was already in her 20s as opposed to a teenager, who's about to come onto his newspaper. So that he tweets this too. The claim that the land of Israel is the historic homeland of the Jewish people is blatantly incorrect, even according to the Bible. So that's an opinion piece. So he's posting, this is a guy posting opinion pieces. He's supposed to be a sports writer. Well, sure, you focus on sports by your own fucking standards. What the hell? Most of these tweets have nothing to do with sports. Nothing to do with sports. So what the hell is going on here? Are the sports writers political? Are the tech writers political? Is everybody political? Only Major League Baseball players can't be political. And if they're political, they have to be the right type. That's about it. I think I'll talk to you guys either tomorrow night or Sunday. This is another person, Lydia Paulgreen, who also had her own episode where that's the one who when Steve Bannon got fired, she said, she put a headline in the Huffington Post that said "Goy bye," saying, "Oh, we're being edgy, we're being edgy, we're being edgy." That was her answer, and she's saying, "Oh, I'm allowed to do this," because she happens to be, I think she's like a black/Jewish lesbian or something. So that's the standard that they employ. They get to say whatever the hell they want, and then they say, "What? But we're being edgy. We're being provocative or whatever." But a Major League Baseball pitcher 6 years ago, he's the one who has to check himself before he wrecks himself. So that's about it. This time for real. I'll talk to you guys later, and have a great weekend. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and also comment after it uploads, and share it.